Hello and welcome to another flying video with flight level 180. Today we are simming again. We are in the FSX field there, Phenom 100, and as you probably know if you see my other videos, this is my favorite kick-around airplane for high-speed, small airplane work, and I really like this plane. And we're going to be doing something. If you look at that runway in the background, we're going to be flying in that airport, which you may recognize as the Lukla airport in Nepal. And this is the airport that is closest to Everest Base Camp, so it's a very popular airport, but is also considered one of the 2 or 3 most dangerous airports in the world to fly into. And I'll show you why when we actually get into this flight of why it's so dangerous. In FSX, it's probably the most dangerous airport and the most difficult airport to land at that I've found yet. It is tough, and you're going to also see that as you do this. If you are working on your pilot skills and you want a real challenge, this is a great one. It's hard. It's very hard, but if you can do this, you know what you're doing. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it, and I'll show you how to do this. So we are currently at Kathmandu Airport, which it's called Tribhuvan, and its airport identifier is Victor November Kilo Tango, and we're flying to Victor November Lima Kilo, which is VNLK, which is the Lukla airport. So VNKT, VNLK. And we are not going to use this flight plan. We're just going to use this for mapping purposes. And the reason why we're not going to fly the GPS route is because we'd fly into a number of very large mountains on the way. You can't do it that way. So we're going to use some VOR tricks and do it that way. Now, if you're interested in doing this flight and you want to read the details of how to do it, there's not a lot of charts out there, but I did find, if you go to wiki.flightgear.org and search for Lukla Airport, there's some details that I used for the departure from Kathmandu and the approach into the airport. So what I did here is I set the nav radio for the Kathmandu VOR, which is 112.3, and then I set my course for 096 using the course knob. And we're going to fly a radial from the Kathmandu VOR of 96 degrees for 70 nautical miles, and then we're going to turn left on a 10-degree course towards the Lukla airport into the valley. Then we're going to do a visual approach to the runway and hopefully put it on the runway. So I set my DME. There's a NDB out there south of the airport where at 236, so I set my NDB for 236, and we're going to use that. So let me turn that on. So I hit PFD and bearing 2 until it says ADF. We're not in range yet, but you'll see that pop up in a bit. And then I'm going to set my turn on DME for the nav radio. So it is 112.3, 112.3, or 0.6 nautical miles. So when this turns to 70 nautical miles, we're going to turn left into the valley. Okay, it's as simple as that. Altitude, we're going to 20,000 feet, which seems strange given that the flight is 73 nautical miles, or a little bit longer. But there's a lot of terrain we need to go over, so that's necessary. So I think I just hit my flat button. Everything looks good. Everything is in the green, so let's go ahead and start our flight. And here we go. So I'm going to spool up my engines to about 40-50%. Everything is green. Let's go full throttle. Release the brakes. Straighten out. We're flying very light today. I did about 30% fuel and just 1 passenger. 80, our airspeed is alive. 80 knots cross check. 92 knots is our rotation speed, so there it is. Okay, looks like we have a positive rate. We do. Let's hit our brakes and hit gear. Notice it's already complaining about the fuel, but I think we have enough. Okay, 132 knots. Let's go ahead and start our turn to the right. We're trying to, if you can see down there on the nav radio, on the nav compass, we need to intercept that course, and we're a little bit right of that course. So let's get our nose up. I really want to pitch, 127, 130, somewhere in there, to get out of this airport area as fast as possible, and I'll show you why in a few seconds. Okay, that's a little steep. Right about there is good. 15 degrees nose up, and that is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and straighten out, and we're going to turn on the autopilot and start talking. So I'm going to hit heading, I'm going to hit center click on there, and I'm going to hit autopilot. We are on autopilot, and let's make sure we have heading mode on. Heading mode is on. There we go, and we're going to fly to the right of this course until we intercept this line, and to make sure the autopilot captures it, we're going to hit nav. So you see it's in VOR acquisition mode. We're still in heading mode. As soon as this line slides over and catches, so we're on the radial, the airplane's going to turn left and capture that VOR. Now, as I was saying, so this is right here is one of the most annoying things about this airplane, or the only seriously annoying thing is the map freezes. And feel there, if one of you guys are watching this and you have the time, you should fix this. This is a freaking mess. So it needs to be fixed. So because it freezes constantly. So there's our course, and we are going to fly basically slightly south here. Let's turn on our terrain topo. So you can see we're going to fly here. We're going to fly up this little valley and come around behind the airport and land. And you can see the airplane's banking to the left because it's capturing that VOR. That's excellent. Now, let's go ahead and bring our flaps up. And we are going to go ahead and bring our speed up. Let's get our speed up to about 160 knots, and we're going to climb out at about 160. Now, to show you why I'm trying to climb as steeply as possible, I mean, look at this. We're at approaching 10,000 feet, and look at the terrain around us. I mean, if you look to the left, there are the Himalayas. It's incredible. It's like the altitude of the mountains around here is so high, and the airport's high to start with. So this is a very dangerous place to hit FLC to hold the speed, and this is not high enough. So let's go up to 160. There we go. Airplane will pitch for 160 knots. FLC is going to control the pitch. Okay, so we're looking good. Let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here. Good. Now, so let's start thinking. So we really need to be thinking ahead here. First thing we know we need to do is we need to turn 10 degrees to a heading of approximately 10 degrees to fly up the valley. So let's go ahead and get that set. Our heading is set at 129 here. So let's turn it to 10 degrees. I'm using the control button to speed up the movement of this, and it's a really nice feature. Okay, so when I hit heading, it will turn to 10 degrees. Let's see, what else do we need to do? So this is our ADF needle. It's pointing at that NDB, which is somewhere around here. When that is pointing to about 190, the head of the arrow is there, and the tail is pointing to about 10, that's when we're going to start our turn to the left up the valley. So it's not super useful or necessary, but it's helpful to give us a second point of reference that we know we're going in the right direction. Okay, we're perfectly on our horizontal course, so everything is looking good. Now, we are at 15,000 feet, everything's looking good. So, next thing we need to know. So, we are flying to a point that's 70 nautical miles from the Kathmandu airport. And we're flying up to 20,000 feet. Now, let me show you the chart so you can get calibrated as exactly what's happening here. So, if you look here, we are down here in the bottom left. We're coming in on this arrow, on that bearing, basically due east, to that intersection, the initial approach fix, which is fluffy, and we need to be there at 13,000 feet. Then we are going to turn north and head straight up the valley, almost due north, and then once we get over that last little ridge, we're going to turn right, turn straight into the runway, and land up into the mountain. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. Now, so that's the first piece of information we need to know. We need to be at 13,000 feet when this is 70 nautical miles right here from the Kathmandu VOR. So we're descending, we're going to go from 20,000 to 13,000. So what is our, at what point do we need to start a descent? That's the next question. Well, we don't have VNAV. This is FSX. It's a basic airplane on FSX. It's not PMDG. It doesn't give us our VNAV. So we got to figure it out ourselves. And that's a good exercise, actually. I like the fact that we have to figure that out because it becomes automatic if you do it enough. So we're going to 20,000 to 13,000. That's 7,000 feet. We're going to multiply that by 3. So 21,000 or 21. Remove the thousands. And then we're going to add about 10%, a little bit more. So about 25 nautical miles from the bottom of our descent, we need to start is the top of descent. Okay, so what's 25 nautical miles from 70 nautical miles? It's 45 nautical miles. So when we're 45 nautical miles from the Kathmandu airport, that's when we start descent. So we have 25 nautical miles to go. Now you notice we're starting to level off. And when this goes to from Alt S, we can go ahead and go into CSC, which is cruise speed control, which is sort of their poor man's auto throttle. So let's go ahead. We're going to cruise at 260 knots. And you notice we're almost there. Airplane is starting to pitch down to hold its altitude. You notice how slow it is pitching down to the altitude. It's a little odd. I've never seen a real airplane or an FSX airplane do it this slowly. So here we go, almost to Alt. Boom. So now it's Alt, so we hit CSC. So now the airplane is going to quote auto throttle or use the FSX to control the speed and set it at a max. It's basically cruise at 260 knots. You know, this airplane doesn't have real auto throttles like a Gulfstream or a TBM 940. It basically just has CSC, which sets the FSX for cruise speed, but only at cruise speed. And then in the ascent, it has the pitch control with FLC. But in descent, it's completely manual. You got to do it yourself. So we have about 19 miles to go. Let's go ahead and look at some of our maps. I'm sorry I left that up. I hope it didn't screw you up at all. So let's go to what the airport looks like. So this is a top-down view of the airport. You can see there that we're going to enter from about this direction, and we're going to come up from bottom left to top right, and you can see there's mountains up here right at the end of the runway. So there's not a lot of places to really bail out here. It's like once you're committed, and that's what makes this airport so dangerous. And here is a picture from the cockpit on a final approach, and there's some things to notice here. First of all, look at those mountains at the end. You know, in almost every airplane, there's no bail out there. Once you get down towards that runway environment, there's no going around. So you either hit it or you're screwed, is basically it. The other things to notice, first of all, this is a very steep descent. He's about 4 degrees there, it looks like to me. I mean, the official descent is about 3.7 degrees, and which is steeper than normal. So that's something to keep in mind, and you really need to keep your speed down so you don't build up too much speed. The next thing to notice is that runway is short. That is not a long runway, so you know you really need to touch down at the very beginning. And the last thing, and the thing that helps us, is that runway is sloped uphill. So its gravity is going to help you a lot in slowing down the airplane. Now let's talk about what you get in FSX. First of all, the runway doesn't appear to be on the same bearing as in the real world, or what it is. By the way, an X-Plane 11 has this runway basically perfect. It's set up on the right bearing, it has the slope, everything is correct. But in FSX, it's offset, so you can't do that straight-in landing. It's not sloped uphill. It's certainly not well sloped uphill, and the runway is shorter than it is in real life. So this is just insanely difficult to land on with this airplane or most airplanes. I mean, even in a Cessna, it's not easy. So it's a real challenge. Now, just to give you a sense, I mean, I've done this in X-Plane in high-performance airplanes, and it's very easy. I did it the first time without a problem, and I've had to practice this a lot to even get close to getting this almost all the time. So it's much more difficult with this in FSX. Now I just brought my altitude down to 13,000. We haven't started descent yet, but see, look, we're at 44 nautical miles, so we might as well start descending. So I'm going to bring my speed back a little bit. I'm going to hit V speed, and I'm going to go ahead and bring it down to about 1,900 feet per minute. And I'm going to tell you in a second why I'm choosing that. You notice the speed is shooting up. So let's get our speed down so we don't overspeed. And the last thing we want is to go too fast anyway. So the way you calculate this, and I talk about this in depth in my other videos, is you take the ground speed and you round it up to the nearest 20, so 380. You divide that by 2, which is 190, and then you add a 0, which is 1,900 feet per minute. So I want to go down a little more aggressively because for 2 reasons. First of all, it's much better to level off a little early than to be diving down to catch your altitude. Second reason is something I talked to you about a little bit before, which is this airplane is very slow to level out. I'm not sure why. It's just what it is in this airplane. So not manually, but when you actually use the autopilot. So we're going to try to get down early and try to take that into account. We should be at 13,000 at the correct time. So we are looking good. We are 50, so we have 18 nautical miles to go before we make our left turn. And everything is looking good. Now if you look here, this needle is starting to move around, and when it gets to about there, that's about the end of where we want to turn. We're probably going to turn when it's a little before, pointing at 10 degrees here. It's when it's going to be about 5 degrees. Okay, everything's looking good. Now let's talk strategy. This holds true for most flights, but especially for this flight, is you want to have your speed under control. And when I mean under control, that means you need to have your flaps fully deployed. You want to be fully dirty. You want to have your gear down, your flaps deployed, and you want to be down in final approach speeds very early. And that's because we're going to be worrying about hitting terrain and worrying about getting lined up for the runway in a super difficult approach. And the last thing you want to be doing is worrying too much about speed. So when we hit 70 nautical miles, which is 11 nautical miles from here, I'm going to be cranking down the throttle, well, let's not call it the throttle, the thrust system, and trying to get down to under 200 knots and very early. And if you do that, it will make things a lot easier on you. Now we have 1,800 feet to go. We have really pretty hot here. So let's go ahead and start bringing our speed down. And 9 nautical miles to go. We can go ahead and now you notice that we're getting warnings about terrain. We're going to get a lot of terrain warnings as we come into this airport. I mean, basically we're going to be almost knocking trees over to get onto this runway. Now there are two ways to approach here, unlike the real airport, because the airport is off angle. You can actually come in from either direction. I like coming in the way that we're doing it. There's 2 reasons. First of all, I find it a little harder to stop on the runway when you come in from the obvious direction, when you just go straight in. But second reason is just a lot harder to do what we're about to do. So I find it a lot more entertaining to do it the hard way. So we're gonna do an easy landing. Let's go land somewhere easy. That's not the point here. So we have 4 nautical miles to go. Our speed is coming down nicely. When I get down to about 200, I'm going to drop my gear, and we're going to start putting in some flaps. I mean, you can see this is the runway. This is the valley we're going to. That brown spot right there is the spot we're going to go over. We're going to come here, go over that brown spot, and land. You can't even see the runway here. It's pretty amazing. So we can drop our gear. And give it a notch of flaps, and then I want to bring my thrust up to about 72, 73%, and that's going to really get me into good speed through the runway. It's going to into the approach environment. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my chair a few notches. So Shift Enter, and now we are looking good. Let's go ahead and start our left turn. and we're going to turn off our autopilot in a few seconds. There we go. So this is the correct, let's make sure we're in the correct valley. If you go past this, you go in the wrong valley here, you're pretty much going to die. If you go in here, or you go in this valley, there's really nowhere to go. This is the valley you need to be in. So we're going to go right along this edge, swing past here, come around here, and land that direction. Okay, let's go ahead and turn off the autopilot. We're going to do it by turning off the yaw damper. And you notice it says yaw damper off, yaw damp is flashing. The reason we're doing that, well, first of all, you never want to land with yaw damper on because it destroys your rudder authority. But the second reason I'm doing it is because we're going to need to be side slipping and doing all sorts of crazy maneuvers to get this airplane onto the ground. So let's take a peek outside. Let's see if we can see that runway. So the airport is right back here. So we're going to slide in here and come in there. That's the goal. And you can't even see it from here. You can see how incredibly difficult this is. Now if we were flying in X-plane, you'd go to this point and you go straight in, which is much, much easier. But this is, we're going to do it the hard way. Let's go ahead and get another notch, F7. We have 2 knots. Let's check our everything. Our gas is fine. Our undercarriage is down 3 greens. Our mixture and prop, we don't need to worry about. Our flaps are flaps 2. We need 1 more notch. And let's see if we can see where we're going here. There is the runway right there. So we're going to circle all the way around and see what we can do. $1,400. So we're going to swing nice and wide here, and I think we need to bring our speed down a little bit. Maybe let's bring our nose up and start bringing the flaps down. Okay, looking good. Okay, I have a dog scratching at my cockpit door, but I'm going to ignore him. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to watch this trying to watch that speedometer right there, and there we go. Okay, so let's get our speed down and start dipping our nose in. So basically we're going to skim right along this ridge, and we're going to just scud right over the tops of these trees. You notice my speed is down, I have my flaps down, I have my gear down. Everything is looking good. So basically I want to be almost throttle off. So let's pause for a second. I'm going to get a lot of warnings here. So here is my final approach point, and I want to fly, basically be turning about that angle and just turning in sharply as I get to the runway there. So that's really your goal there, is to fly right over that. Okay. Just giving a tiny bit of fuel. And when we get on that runway, we're just going to hit the brakes. And we're going to use some G's to bleed off some speed here. It's going to tell me about bank angle right now. Get a stop in time. Woo! And that's how it's done. Clean it up. So let's see if the airplane's in one piece. I don't see any broken parts, no collapsed landing gear. That's the way it's done. Pretty much one of the hardest approaches you ever do. Now, one thing I recommend is when you're actually coming in and doing the the downwind leg, you need to probably save it right about here when you're out there. And just try it over and over until you get it. It's really takes some doing to actually get that flight perfect. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you find it challenging and fun to do that approach. If you can do that, you know what you're doing. It's a really hard approach. I'm thinking about doing this in X-plane, just so you guys can see the difference. I do take suggestions. Somebody suggested to me I do a smaller airport approach, so I did this one because I found it to be the most interesting. So thank you for the suggestions and keep them coming in. Best regards. And thank you for watching Flight Level 180.